The morning sun cuts through the bulletproof windows of the Regional Police Training Academy like a blade, casting harsh shadows across the gymnasium floor where 37 recruits stand at attention. Their boots gleam, their uniforms crisp, their faces stern with determination. The air carries the scent of industrial disinfectant, mixed with the nervous sweat of people who know they're about to be tested beyond their limits. Among them stands Sarah Chen, 5'4" in her combat boots, her delicate features almost lost in the sea of broad shoulders and intimidating stares. The academy itself represents everything formidable about law enforcement: concrete walls thick enough to stop bullets, fluorescent lights that cast everything in stark relief, and an atmosphere of controlled aggression that seems to seep from the very foundation. This is where dreams come to be forged into reality or shattered into irrelevance. For Sarah, it represents the culmination of a journey that began in tragedy and determination 6 years ago. Listen up, recruits. Sergeant Marcus Kane's voice booms across the gymnasium, his massive frame commanding instant silence. 23 years on the force, decorated veteran of 3 police shootings, and the kind of man who believes police work belongs to those with fists like hammers and voices like thunder. His cold gray eyes sweep the formation with the practiced assessment of someone who has seen good cops die because they weren't tough enough when it mattered. His gaze lingers with obvious disapproval on Sarah's slight figure, taking in her delicate bone structure, her feminine features, her complete lack of physical intimidation factor. Today begins your tactical combat training. Real police work isn't about being nice or following procedures when some psychopath is trying to kill you. It's about survival, yours and the innocent people counting on you to stand between them and violence. Kane's uniform bears the weight of authority earned through blood and sacrifice. Commendation ribbons that tell stories of bravery under fire, a scar along his jawline from a knife fight with a drug dealer, and the confident bearing of someone who has never doubted his place in the hierarchy of strength. His philosophy of law enforcement was forged in back alleys and domestic violence calls where hesitation meant death and weakness was a luxury that got good people killed. Sarah's fingers unconsciously brush against the small silver pendant hanging beneath her uniform. Shirta fallen officer's badge, worn smooth by years of desperate prayers and whispered promises. The metal is warm against her skin, carrying the weight of memory and responsibility that has driven every decision she's made since the day her world changed forever. I won't let them down, Dad. Not today. Not ever. Physical weakness gets good cops killed, Kane continues, his gaze now locked directly on Sarah with the intensity of a predator studying prey. And weakness comes in many forms. Sometimes it looks like inexperienced rookies who think they can talk their way out of every situation. Sometimes it looks like fear officers who freeze when the shooting starts and innocent people pay the price. His lip curls with unmistakable disdain, an expression that has broken the spirit of countless recruits who couldn't measure up to his standards. And sometimes it looks like someone who should be teaching kindergarten instead of carrying a badge, and pretending they can handle the worst humanity has to offer. The words slice through the gymnasium like shards of glass, each syllable designed to wound and humiliate. Around Sarah, the other recruits shift uncomfortably, recognizing the casual cruelty in Kane's assessment, but grateful it isn't directed at them. A few snicker nervously, the sound echoing off the concrete walls like the laughter of hyenas circling wounded prey. Sarah's jaw tightens imperceptibly, but her posture remains rigid, professional, unbroken. She's heard worse. Much worse. The streets of Baghdad taught her that words, no matter how cutting, are just air given malicious shape. Kane begins dividing the recruits into sparring pairs with the methodical efficiency of someone who has performed this ritual hundreds of times. His selections are deliberate, pairing individuals of similar size and experience, ensuring that each partnership represents a fair test of skill and determination. He deliberately skips over Sarah, his oversight so obvious it might as well be announced over the Academy's public address system. The message is clear. She doesn't belong here, doesn't merit consideration, exists as an observer to real police work rather than a participant. Only Sarah and 3 of the largest male recruits remain standing awkwardly to the side when Kane finishes his assignments. Jake Morrison, 6'3" former college linebacker, with hands like sledgehammers and a neck thick enough to stop small caliber bullets. His college football career ended when he destroyed his knee in a championship game, but the aggressive instincts that made him dominant on the gridiron translated seamlessly to law enforcement aspirations. Derek Walsh, ex-military with tattoos crawling up his forearms telling stories of deployments in hostile territories, his eyes carrying the 1,000-yard stare of someone who has seen combat and survived to tell about it. And Tommy Rodriguez, whose reputation for bar fights preceded him to the academy like a warning label, his scarred knuckles speaking to a lifetime of settling disputes with violence rather than words. These 3 men represent everything Kane believes law enforcement requires: size, strength, experience with violence, and the willingness to use force when civilization breaks down and only physical dominance remains. They are his ideal students, living embodiments of his philosophy that police work belongs to those capable of imposing their will through superior physical capability. "Well, well," Kane announces with theatrical disappointment, his voice carrying to every corner of the gymnasium and ensuring that every recruit witnesses this moment of manufactured drama. "It seems we have an odd number. Chen, you'll observe today. Probably safer that way for everyone involved." The humiliation burns like acid in Sarah's throat, but she doesn't flinch. The rejection is complete, total, designed to demonstrate her irrelevance in a world where only the strong survive and the weak become statistics. Around the gymnasium, partnerships form naturally experienced recruits with athletic builds, confident handshakes, the easy camaraderie of those who belong. They exchange knowing glances, sizing up their opponents, discussing strategy with the casual confidence of people who have never doubted their place in the world. Sarah stands alone in the center of the mat, an island of rejection in a sea of acceptance. The isolation is deliberate, calculated to break her spirit and send her fleeing to administrative positions where her perceived weakness can't endanger real officers. The other recruits avoid eye contact, unwilling to be associated with someone so obviously marked for failure. She can feel their judgment, like physical weight, their assumption that she represents some misguided attempt at political correctness rather than genuine law enforcement potential. "Actually, Sergeant," Sarah's voice cuts through the murmur of conversation like a blade through silk, clear and steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "I'd like to participate." The words hang in the air like a challenge, unexpected and unwelcome. Kane's eyebrows arch in mock surprise, his expression suggesting that a houseplant has just requested permission to perform surgery. The other recruits pause their conversations, suddenly interested in this moment of potential entertainment. The silence stretches, pregnant with anticipation and disbelief. "Participate?" Kane's voice drips with condescension, each syllable stretched for maximum impact. "In tactical combat training?" He gestures broadly to the other recruits, ensuring everyone witnesses this moment of defiance. "Look around, Chen. See those men? Average weight, 190. Average height, 6 feet. They've been in fights, real fights, where losing means hospitals or morgues. They know what it means to take a hit that would drop most people and keep standing, keep fighting, keep protecting innocent people who can't protect themselves." Kane steps closer, his imposing shadow falling across Sarah like a threat. His physical presence is overwhelming, designed to intimidate and diminish. The scent of his cologne mixes with the underlying aggression that radiates from his pores like heat from an engine. "You weigh what? 120 soaking wet? You think this is some feminist fantasy where heart matters more than bone density? Where motivation overcomes physics? Where good intentions stop bullets or knives or fists moving at full speed?" His voice rises, ensuring that every word carries to the farthest corners of the gymnasium. This isn't a movie, Chen. This isn't some inspirational story where the underdog wins through pure determination. This is preparation for situations where hesitation kills innocent people and weakness its good cops buried. The gymnasium falls silent, except for the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the distant sound of traffic beyond the reinforced walls. Every eye is on Sarah now, waiting for her to break, to apologize, to slink away, and confirm every assumption they've made about her capabilities and limitations. The pressure is enormous, designed to crush spirits, can eliminate those who can't handle the psychological warfare that precedes physical confrontation. Instead, she meets Kane's stare with unwavering composure, her brown eyes reflecting a calm that seems almost supernatural in its intensity. "I think I can handle myself, Sergeant." Kane's laugh is harsh, echoing off the concrete walls like the bark of a rabid dog. "Handle yourself? Against whom exactly?" He gestures toward Morrison, whose broad chest strains against his uniform shirt like a barrel barely contained by fabric. "Jake here played Division I football, defensive end. He's been hit by freight trains disguised as running backs, hit so hard that his ancestors felt it. He knows what it means to get back up when everything in your body is screaming at you to stay down." Kane moves to Walsh, clapping a heavy hand on the man's shoulder with enough force to stagger someone smaller. "Derek survived 3 tours in Afghanistan. He knows what real violence looks like, what it feels like to fight for your life when the bullets are real and the stakes are everything you care about. He's killed men who were trying to kill him, and he sleeps fine at night because he understands that sometimes violence is the only language evil understands." Finally, he stops beside Rodriguez, whose scarred knuckles speak to a lifetime of confrontations where backing down meant becoming prey. "And Tommy?" Tommy grew up in neighborhoods where being tough wasn't optional, it was survival, where showing weakness meant predators would mark you for destruction. He learned to fight because the alternative was being a victim. Kane spreads his arms wide, addressing the entire room now with the passion of a preacher delivering a sermon about damnation. These men represent the reality of police work: size, strength, experience with violence, and the willingness to do whatever it takes when civilization breaks down and only force remains between order and chaos. His gaze returns to Sarah, and his voice drops to a cutting whisper that somehow carries to every corner of the gymnasium like a secret shared with malicious intent. "What you represent, Chen, is a liability, a feel-good diversity hire who'll get real officers killed when the shooting starts and the screaming begins. When some drug-crazed psychopath is trying to murder a family and only violence can stop him, your good intentions won't matter. Your feelings won't matter. Only strength will matter." The words hit like physical blows, each one calculated to wound, to diminish, to break her spirit in front of everyone who matters in her chosen profession. Kane's assessment isn't just professional criticism. It's a systematic attempt to destroy her confidence and drive her from a career he believes she has no right to pursue. Sarah feels the heat rising in her cheeks, the familiar sting of tears threatening behind her eyes, like traitors waiting to expose her vulnerability. She thinks of her father, Officer Daniel Chen, whose photograph sits on her nightstand smiling, proud, wearing the uniform with the kind of dignity that made her believe police work was a calling rather than just a job. His image represents everything noble about law enforcement, the idea that courage comes in all sizes, and that protection is a sacred duty rather than a demonstration of dominance. "Remember, little warrior," she can almost hear his voice, spoken during countless bedtime stories when she was young. "True strength isn't loud, it's unshakable. It doesn't need to prove itself because it knows what it is." "I still want to participate, Sergeant," Sarah repeats, her voice somehow even steadier than before, carrying an authority that seems to come from some deep well of certainty that Kane can't understand or touch. Kane's expression shifts from amusement to genuine annoyance, his confidence wavering slightly in the face of her unshakable resolve. This isn't how these moments usually go. Usually, the weak ones recognize their limitations and fade quietly into administrative roles where they can't endanger real officers. They don't stand there like immovable objects, refusing to be intimidated or diminished by superior size and institutional authority. The sergeant's jaw tightens, his frustration mounting as Sarah's quiet defiance threatens his carefully constructed demonstration. He has built his reputation on breaking down inappropriate candidates and weeding out those who can't handle the realities of police work. Her refusal to break represents a challenge to his authority and expertise that he can't allow to stand. "Fine," he snaps, his patience finally exhausted, and his voice carrying the edge of someone whose professional judgment is being questioned by someone he considers fundamentally unqualified. "You want to participate? Morrison, Walsh, Rodriguez, you three against Chen. Let's settle this delusion once and for all." A collective intake of breath sweeps through the gymnasium like wind through wheat. 3 against 1 isn't training, it's demolition. It's designed to humiliate, to physically demonstrate the futility of her ambitions and the danger of allowing weakness to masquerade as strength. Several recruits exchange uncomfortable glances. They're training in fair play, warring with their desire to witness the resolution of this conflict. They sense they're about to witness something that crosses the line from education into cruelty. But none possess the authority or courage to intervene. Morrison steps forward first, his conscience briefly warring with his desire to impress his superiors and establish his position in the academy hierarchy. His football instincts tell him this is wrong. You don't gang up on someone half your size. But his desire for acceptance in this new world overrides his moral compass. "Sergeant, maybe you should follow orders." Kane cuts him off with the kind of finality that ends careers before they begin. "Unless you're also having second thoughts about police work? Unless you think feelings matter more than following commands when lives are on the line?" The 3 men form a loose triangle around Sarah, their combined weight and reach advantage so overwhelming that the outcome seems predetermined by the laws of physics. Morrison at 210, Walsh at 195, Rodriguez at 185 over 590 pounds of muscle, bone, and aggression arrayed against Sarah's 120 pounds of apparent defenselessness. She stands in the center of their formation, looking impossibly small, her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing slow and controlled, like someone preparing for meditation rather than combat. What they can't see is the way her muscles have subtly shifted into readiness, the slight adjustment of her stance that speaks to countless hours of training they know nothing about. What they can't see is the mental switch flipping inside her mind, a transformation from academy recruit to something far more dangerous, a warrior awakening from a long sleep. Sarah's eyes briefly close, and for just a moment, she's not in a police academy gymnasium surrounded by fluorescent lights and institutional hostility. She's 18 years old again, standing beside her father's flag-draped coffin while a uniformed honor guard folds the American flag with mechanical precision. The memory is crystal clear, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mantle. The promise she made to his memory that she would continue his work of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Then she's 22, graduating from the Marine Corps' martial arts program. As the top student in her class, while her instructors shake their heads in amazement at what they've witnessed, the hours of training blur together endless repetitions of strikes, throws, chokes, and defensive maneuvers until they become as natural as breathing. The philosophy of warrior ethos being drilled into her mind alongside the physical techniques, honor, courage, commitment, and the understanding that strength comes not from size, but from skill, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. She's 24, leaving the military with commendations and skills that most people couldn't imagine, carrying secrets she's never allowed herself to discuss. The memories of firefights where her life depended on split-second decisions, of carrying wounded Marines through hostile territory while taking fire from 3 directions, of moments when failure meant death not just for herself, but for the brothers and sisters who depended on her. They just humiliated the wrong woman. The thought crystallizes in her mind with absolute clarity. These men see weakness where strength has been forged in fires they can't imagine. They see vulnerability where competence has been tested under conditions that would break most people. They see a target when they should see a threat. Begin. Kane's command cracks like a whip across the gymnasium. Morrison moves first, his football instincts kicking in as he charges forward with the overwhelming momentum that served him well on college gridirons. 210 pounds of linebacker fury, shoulders lowered, arms spread wide to prevent escape. He expects Sarah to dodge, to create distance, to buy herself precious seconds before the inevitable conclusion. His strategy is simple: overwhelm her with superior size and strength. Pin her against the mat and demonstrate the futility of her ambitions in the most humiliating way possible. Instead, she steps directly into his charge. What happens next defies every assumption, every expectation, every law of physics that Kane thought he understood about combat. Sarah's right hand shoots forward with surgical precision, striking Morrison's solar plexus with devastating accuracy. The blow doesn't look dramatic, no wild haymaker, no flashy technique that might impress spectators. Just a simple, perfectly timed strike that instantly paralyzes his diaphragm and sends shock waves through his nervous system. The technique is called a nerve strike in Marine Corps martial arts, training a precise application of force to specific points on the human body that can incapacitate opponents regardless of size differential. Sarah learned it from a gunnery sergeant who had survived 3 tours in Iraq by understanding that in real combat, technique trumps size every single time. Morrison's forward momentum becomes his enemy as his breath explodes from his lungs and his legs turn to water. The 200-pound linebacker who had steamrolled defensive lines suddenly can't control his own body, his nervous system short-circuiting under the precision of Sarah's attack. Before he can process what's happening, before his mind can send new commands to muscles that are no longer responding, Sarah's left arm wraps around his neck in a blood choke so technically perfect that Marine Corps instructors would applaud. The choke is applied with mathematical precision, not crushing his windpipe, which would be brutal and potentially fatal, but compressing the carotid arteries that supply blood to his brain. 3 seconds of properly applied pressure is all it takes to render someone unconscious, regardless of their size or strength. Morrison's eyes widen in shock and confusion before they roll back, his consciousness fading as his brain is temporarily deprived of oxygen. His unconscious body crumples to the mat with a sound like falling timber. 200 pounds of muscle reduced to dead weight by superior technique and tactical knowledge. Walsh, his military training screaming warnings about the impossibility of what he just witnessed, lunges forward with a combat knife-hand strike aimed at Sarah's throat. His technique is solid, honed by years of Army combatives training and real-world application in hostile environments where mistakes meant death. The strike is designed to crush her windpipe and end the fight. Instantly, a battlefield technique intended to kill rather than subdue. But Walsh's military training, impressive as it is, was designed for conventional warfare against enemies of similar size and strength. Sarah's training was forged in the crucible of unconventional warfare, where Marines faced opponents who might be larger, stronger, and more numerous. She learned to turn superior force against itself, to use an enemy's strength as a weapon against them. Sarah deflects his strike with casual efficiency, redirecting his energy while simultaneously trapping his extended arm in a joint lock that hyperextends, his elbow beyond its natural range of motion. The pain is immediate and overwhelming, but before Walsh can react, Sarah's hip drives into his midsection as she executes a textbook judo throw that sends his 200-pound frame sailing through the air like a discarded doll. Walsh lands hard on his back, the impact driving the air from his lungs and leaving him gasping like a landed fish. The throw was performed with sufficient force to incapacitate but not injure a demonstration of control. That speaks to countless hours of training and an understanding of exactly how much force is required to achieve specific outcomes. Rodriguez, his street fighting instincts finally overriding his shock at seeing two of his allies neutralized in seconds, attacks from behind with a rear naked choke. His strategy is sound approach from Sarah's blind spot while she's focused on Walsh. Get his arms around her neck and use his superior size to crush her into submission. It's a reasonable assumption from someone who learned to fight in alleys and parking, lots where survival trumped technique and victory belonged to the most ruthless. He's wrong about everything. Sarah senses his approach before he makes contact. Her peripheral vision and spatial awareness, honed by years of combat operations, where failing to detect threats meant death. She ducks under his grasping arms with fluid grace, pivots with balletic precision, and drives her elbow into his liver with the kind of accuracy that only comes from understanding human anatomy at the molecular level. The liver shot is one of the most devastating techniques in martial arts, a strike to an organ that, when impacted properly, sends shockwaves through the entire nervous system. Rodriguez's knees buckle as his body's own defense mechanisms betray him, his nervous system shutting down non-essential functions to protect vital organs. He collapses in a writhing heap of agony, his street fighting experience useless against someone who understands the science of violence rather than just its application. Total elapsed time, 8.7 seconds. The gymnasium falls into a silence, so complete that the fluorescent lights seem deafening. 34 recruits stand frozen in disbelief, their mouths hanging open, their worldviews cracking like poorly mixed concrete. The impossible has just happened before their eyes. A slight woman has systematically dismantled 3 larger, stronger, more experienced opponents with an efficiency that borders on the supernatural. Kane's face has gone pale, his confident sneer replaced by something approaching horror. His entire philosophy of law enforcement, built on the foundation that size and strength determine competence, has just been demolished by a 120-pound woman who made his best students look like amateurs. The implications are staggering. If he's wrong about Sarah, what else might he be wrong about? Sarah stands in the center of the mat, her breathing barely elevated, her uniform still perfectly pressed. Around her, 3 of the Academy's most formidable recruits lie in various states of unconsciousness and misery, living testimony to the gap between assumption and reality. She shows no signs of fatigue, no indication that she has just engaged in combat. If anything, she appears more relaxed than before, as if the violence has somehow centered her. What they didn't know, Sarah says quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the absolute silence, was that I spent 6 years in the Marines, Marine Corps' martial arts program, Black Belt. I served 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. I've been in firefights where the enemy knew my name and wanted me dead specifically because of the damage I could do to their operations. She reaches into her shirt and pulls out the pendant she's been hiding. Not just her father's badge, but a Silver Star medal, its ribbon faded from years of being worn close to her heart. The medal catches the fluorescent light, its significance immediately recognizable to anyone with military experience. The Silver Star represents the 3rd highest military decoration for valor, awarded only for gallantry and action against an enemy of the United States. I've killed men who were trying to kill my brothers and sisters in arms, Sarah continues, her voice steady despite the weight of memories that most people couldn't bear. I've carried wounded Marines through hostile territory while taking fire from 3 directions, knowing that stopping meant everyone died. I've held the line when retreat would have meant abandoning innocent civilians to slaughter. Kane's eyes are locked on the Silver Star, his law enforcement experience automatically recognizing one of the military's highest honors for combat valor. The medal represents courage under fire that most people can't even imagine, actions that saved lives at tremendous personal risk. The woman standing before him isn't just a recruit. She's a decorated war hero whose combat experience dwarfs anything he has ever faced. My father was Officer Daniel Chen, Sarah's voice takes on a reverent tone, speaking a name that carries weight in law enforcement circles. He was killed in the line of duty when I was 18, shot 3 times responding to a domestic violence call while off duty, because he couldn't ignore someone calling for help. He died protecting a woman and her 2 children from a man who had already beaten them half to death. Her voice remains steady, but tears glisten in her eyes like diamonds, reflecting pain and pride in equal measure. I joined the Marines the next day. I wanted to serve, to protect people the way he protected people. I wanted to be worthy of the sacrifice he made and the example he set. She looks around the gymnasium, meeting the eyes of every recruit who moments before had watched her humiliation with varying degrees of entertainment and pity. Now they see her differently, not as a victim or a diversity hire, but as someone whose credentials dwarf their own, whose experience makes their assumptions seem childish and naive. I came here because civilian law enforcement was my father's calling, and now it's mine. I didn't share my background because I wanted to earn my place based on who I am now, not who I used to be. I wanted to prove that I belonged here through performance, not pedigree. Morrison is stirring now, slowly sitting up with the confused expression of someone waking from an unexpected nap. His hand goes to his throat, checking for damage, his eyes focusing slowly on Sarah with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. Walsh has managed to roll over and push himself up on his elbows, his military training helping him process what just happened faster than the others. Rodriguez remains curled in the fetal position, still processing the reality that someone half his size just shut down his central nervous system with surgical precision. Kane stands like a statue, his authority evaporating in real time as the full scope of his misjudgment becomes clear. He's not just wrong about Sarah, he's catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. She's not a diversity hire or a weakness in the system. She's exactly the kind of officer that every department desperately needs and rarely finds someone with genuine combat experience, proven courage under fire, and the technical skills to back up her credentials. Sergeant Kane, Sarah continues, her voice taking on the unmistakable authority of someone who has led troops in combat. With respect, real strength isn't about size or volume or intimidation. It's about competence, dedication, and the willingness to stand up when others can't or won't. She helps Morrison to his feet, her movements gentle despite the devastating efficiency she displayed moments earlier. Her touch is professional, almost medical, checking his pupils for signs of concussion, ensuring his breathing is normal, treating him with the kind of care that speaks to extensive experience dealing with casualties. Police work isn't about being the biggest or the loudest, Sarah explains as she assists Walsh in standing. It's about being smart, prepared, and committed to protecting people who can't protect themselves. Sometimes that requires force, but force should always be precise, controlled, and proportional to the threat. Kane finally finds his voice, though it comes out as a hoarse whisper that betrays his complete disorientation. Chen, The demonstration was. The demonstration was necessary, Sarah interrupts firmly, but not disrespectfully. Not to prove anything to you, but to show these recruits that assumptions can be deadly. In the field, underestimating someone can get you killed. Overestimating someone can get innocent people killed. The only safe approach is to assess threats based on capability rather than appearance. She turns to address the other recruits directly, her bearing and tone shifting into what can only be described as a command presence, the indefinable quality that makes people instinctively listen when certain individuals speak. It's the voice of someone who has given orders under fire and been obeyed without question. Every person you encounter as a police officer will surprise you, Sarah explains, her words carrying the weight of hard-earned experience. The sweet grandmother might be running a drug operation that's killed dozens of people. The scared teenager might be carrying a gun and prepared to use it. The well-dressed businessman might be planning violence against his family or coworkers. She glances meaningfully at Kane, driving home the lesson with surgical precision. And sometimes, a person you think is weakest might be the one who saves your life when everything goes wrong and you need someone with the skills and courage to pull you out of hell. Rodriguez has finally managed to sit up, his face flushed with embarrassment, but also unmistakable respect. The pain in his side is subsiding, replaced by awe at the precision of Sarah's technique. Jesus, Chen, where did you learn to fight like that? Sarah offers him a hand up, which he accepts gratefully. Her grip is firm, steady, the hand of someone accustomed to hauling people to safety under fire. Paris Island, Quantico, Camp Pendleton, and about a dozen forward operating bases where the training either worked or you didn't come home. Where hesitation meant death, and technique was the difference between completing the mission and becoming a casualty. As Rodriguez stands, still slightly unsteady, he looks her directly in the eyes with newfound respect. I'm sorry. About what I was thinking about ... everything. I had you pegged all wrong. Don't apologize for underestimating me, Sarah replies with a slight smile that carries more warmth than victory. Use it. Remember that everyone you meet knows something you don't, has skills you don't, has experienced things you haven't. Respect costs nothing, but assumptions can cost everything. The gymnasium erupts in spontaneous applause, not the polite, obligatory clapping of a formal ceremony, but the genuine, enthusiastic appreciation of people who have just witnessed something extraordinary. The sound echoes off the concrete walls like thunder. 34 pairs of hands, creating a percussion that speaks to genuine admiration and respect. Recruit after recruit approaches Sarah, offering handshakes, asking questions, treating her with the deference typically reserved for instructors. They want to know about her techniques, her training, her experiences. The same people who minutes before had written her off as a liability now hang on her every word, recognizing expertise when they see it demonstrated. How do you stay so calm? Asks Rebecca Martinez, one of only 3 other women in the class. I would have been terrified facing 3 guys that size. Sarah considers the question seriously before answering. Fear is just information, she explains. It tells you that you're in danger, but it doesn't dictate your response. In combat, fear keeps you alive if you use it properly. It makes you more alert, more focused, more careful. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, it's to function effectively despite it. What about the techniques? Morrison asks, still rubbing his throat, but clearly eager to learn. That thing you did to me, I've never seen anything like it. Pressure point strikes, Sarah replies. They're part of the Marine Corps' martial arts program. The human body has vulnerabilities that exist regardless of size or strength. If you know where they are and how to exploit them, you can neutralize threats efficiently without causing permanent damage. Kane watches this transformation with growing understanding of how completely he has misread the situation. His authority, built on intimidation and assumptions about strength, seems almost quaint compared to the natural leadership Sarah has just demonstrated. She hasn't just defeated 3 opponents. She's won the respect of an entire class while simultaneously teaching them more about police work than weeks of traditional instruction. The recruits gather around Sarah in an informal circle, their questions coming rapidly as they try to absorb everything they've just witnessed. She answers each one thoughtfully, sharing knowledge and experience with the generosity of someone who understands that teaching makes everyone stronger. Chen, Kane calls out, his voice substantially quieter than before. When she turns toward him, he sees something in her eyes that he recognizes from his own military service, the quiet confidence of someone who has been tested under fire and emerged stronger. A word? They walk to the edge of the mat, away from the celebrating recruits, who are now practicing techniques and discussing what they've just witnessed with the enthusiasm of people whose assumptions about the world have been productively shattered. The conversation that follows will determine whether Kane can salvage his credibility and adapt his methods, or whether his career as an instructor is effectively over. 23 years I've been training recruits, Kane begins, his voice thick with something approaching humility. an emotion he hasn't experienced in decades. I thought I knew what strength looked like. I thought I knew what police work required. I thought size and aggression were the primary qualifications for effective law enforcement. Sarah remained silent, allowing him to process the magnitude of his error without rushing to absolve him of responsibility. Her expression is neutral, professional, giving him space to confront his mistakes without making the moment about her own vindication. Your father, Kane continues, his voice growing stronger as memory clarifies his understanding. Daniel Chen. I remember reading about his death in the department newsletter. Off duty, responded to a domestic violence call, saved a woman and her 2 children before. He trails off, the full weight of Sarah's legacy finally registering. You're Officer Chen's daughter, the one who became a Marine. I am, Sarah confirms simply, without elaboration or drama. Kane runs a hand through his graying hair, suddenly looking older than his 51 years. The weight of his mistakes seems to settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. I've been wrong about a lot of things. About you. About what makes a good officer. About... He gestures vaguely at the gymnasium, where recruits are still discussing the demonstration. About everything, apparently. Sergeant Kane. Sarah's voice is gentle but firm, carrying the wisdom of someone who has seen good people make bad decisions under pressure. Being wrong isn't a failure if you learn from it. Training is supposed to challenge assumptions, yours and theirs. What matters now is what happens next. For the first time since she entered the academy, Kane looks at Sarah as an equal rather than an obstacle. He sees past her size and gender to recognize the competence and experience that should have been obvious from the beginning. What happens next is that you finish this program and become the kind of officer this department needs. What happens next is that I remember what real leadership looks like. He pauses, considering his next words carefully, understanding that what he says now will define the rest of their relationship, and possibly his career. Would you be willing to assist with combat training? These recruits could learn a lot from you. Things I can't teach them, because I've never experienced them myself. Sarah considers the offer, understanding the full significance of what he's asking. He's not just requesting her help, he's acknowledging her expertise, her authority, her place in the hierarchy of knowledge and experience. It's an unprecedented admission from someone whose career has been built on his own supposed superiority. I'd be honored, Sergeant, but I have conditions. Kane nods immediately, eager to repair the damage his prejudice has caused. Name them. No more assumptions about what people can or can't do based on how they look, Sarah begins, her tone taking on the authority of someone establishing non-negotiable parameters. Every recruit gets evaluated on their actual capabilities, not your preconceptions about their limitations. Agreed, Kane responds without hesitation. We teach de-escalation as much as we teach combat, Sarah continues. Force should always be the last resort, not the first option. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from a confrontation that isn't necessary. Agreed completely. And we establish a culture where everyone, regardless of size, gender, or background, is treated with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. This academy should be a place where people are built up, not torn down. Kane extends his hand for a formal handshake, his expression sincere. Deal. Completely and without reservation. 3 months later, Sarah Chen graduates first in her academy class. Her academic scores are perfect. Her physical fitness scores are the highest in academy history, and her tactical evaluations exceed even the most optimistic projections. The transformation in the academy's culture has been remarkable. Recruits now focus on competence over intimidation, technique over brute force, and respect over fear. Her valedictorian speech, delivered to an audience that includes the police chief, the mayor, and families of every graduating recruit, becomes legendary within the department. The gymnasium is packed beyond capacity, with standing room only for those lucky enough to witness. what many consider the most important graduation in the Academy's history. Police work, she tells the assembled crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, isn't about being the strongest person in the room. It's about being strong enough to protect the weakest person in the room. It's not about never being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. She looks out at her fellow graduates, men and women, who now treat her with the respect she earned rather than the skepticism she initially faced. They represent a new generation of law enforcement, one that values competence over assumptions and effectiveness over intimidation. "We are not warriors going to battle," Sarah continues, her words carefully chosen to redefine the relationship between police and the communities they serve. "We are guardians going to serve. The measure of our success isn't how many people we defeat, it's how many people we protect. It's not about winning conflicts, it's about preventing them." The applause is thunderous, but Sarah's eyes find Kane in the audience. He's applauding too, and when their eyes meet, he nods with genuine respect and gratitude. Beside him sits an older woman with Sarah's eyes and her father's smile, her mother, who has watched her daughter transform a moment of humiliation into a platform for systemic change. After the ceremony, as families celebrate and new officers receive their first assignments, Kane approaches Sarah one final time. His demeanor has changed. Completely gone is the intimidating presence, replaced by someone who has learned humility and wisdom from an unexpected teacher. "Chen," he says, extending his hand for a formal handshake. "It's been an honor training with you. The department is lucky to have you, and I'm grateful for everything you taught me about real strength." Sarah accepts his handshake firmly, her grip conveying both forgiveness and expectation. "The honor was mine, Sergeant. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes you have to break people's expectations before you can exceed them." As she walks away, badge gleaming on her chest and her father's medal still hanging close to her heart, Sarah reflects on the journey from humiliation to vindication. She thinks about the recruits who will follow, the assumptions that will be challenged, and the lives that will be protected by officers who learn to see strength in unexpected places. True strength, she knows now, isn't about being unshakable. It's about shaking the world into seeing what they missed the first time. 6 months into her career, Officer Sarah Chen becomes the youngest recipient of the department's Medal of Valor after single-handedly stopping an armed robbery that saved 17 hostages. The incident occurs at a downtown bank where 3 heavily armed men have taken customers and employees prisoner, demanding money and threatening to execute hostages if their demands aren't met. Sarah arrives as backup to a hostage situation that has already claimed one life: a security guard who tried to resist and paid with his life. The primary negotiator is making no progress. The suspects are becoming increasingly agitated, and tactical teams are preparing for an assault that will likely result in multiple casualties. Instead of waiting for orders, Sarah assesses the situation and identifies a ventilation shaft that provides access to the bank's interior. Using skills learned in urban warfare environments, she infiltrates the building undetected and positions herself where she can observe all 3 suspects and most of the hostages. When one of the gunmen begins executing hostages to force compliance with his demands, Sarah acts. Using the same precision she demonstrated in the academy, she neutralizes all 3 suspects within seconds, disarming them with non-lethal techniques that save lives while ending the threat. Her actions prevent a massacre while ensuring that justice can be served through the legal system rather than vigilante violence. The citation specifically mentions her tactical expertise, calm under pressure, and innovative de-escalation techniques. The media coverage emphasizes her background as a Marine veteran, her father's legacy, and her role in transforming police academy training methods. At the award ceremony, she dedicates the medal to her father's memory and to every person who ever felt too small, too weak, or too different to make a difference. Her acceptance speech becomes a defining moment for law enforcement reform, emphasizing service over dominance and protection over power. "They didn't know," she says, Her words broadcast live to a national audience that being underestimated is the greatest tactical advantage of all. When people assume you're weak, they become careless. When they become careless, you have the opportunity to prove that strength comes in many forms. The audience erupts in applause, but Sarah's mind is already focused on tomorrow's shift, on the people she protects, and on proving once again that true strength comes in all sizes, and that the best officers are those who protect rather than dominate. Some assumptions are meant to be shattered, and some women are meant to do the shattering. 5 years later, Captain Sarah Chen oversees the training academy where her journey began. Under her leadership, the academy has become a model for law enforcement training nationwide, emphasizing community service, de-escalation techniques, and the understanding that true strength comes from competence rather than intimidation. Kane, now her deputy, often tells new recruits about the day a small woman taught him that everything he thought he knew about strength was wrong. The lesson has become part of academy folklore, reminder that assumptions can be deadly, and that real leadership comes from inspiring respect rather than demanding it. The academy's motto, inscribed above the entrance where Sarah once stood alone and unwelcome, now reads, "True strength serves others." It's a lesson learned the hard way, but one that has made everyone stronger.